So, I don't remember anything. I might be a trendsetter. Maybe I'm just making it up. I drew a horse as a pig. Hey, and welcome back to another post-Bookmas video to give you guys some inspiration for your 2025 reads. In this video, I have for you 25 books that I am planning to read in 2025, and all these books are published books. So I have absolutely zero reasons to not finish it by the end of 2025. These are 25 books I want to prioritize reading in 2025 after scouring my entire TBR list. And I'm gonna get right into them. I did separate them into different categories and sections to make it easier to go through. You'll see what I mean. I basically grouped a couple of books that I thought that were relevant with each other and related with each other into separate groups to make it a little bit easier for you to navigate through my TBR list. And without any further ado, let's talk about the book that I want to read to kickstart off 2025, the book I want to read to start off the new year with, and it is What You Are Looking For Is in the Library. You've probably already heard about this book in my January TBR, but long story short, Lauren recommended it, and I thought it would be just a great way to start off the new year with. I thought it would give my library a little bit of recognition and also dabble my feet into translated Japanese literature. Not that I don't already read translated Japanese work like mangas and light novels, but you know what I mean. I wanted to dabble into more traditional Japanese literature. So I'm excited to experience my very first translated work in Japanese that's more traditionally published. The next set of books that I'm inspired to read are all from the Ellen Made Book Club. The first one up is Piranesi. This was one of her original book club picks when I first started watching her channel. And I recall she absolutely loved this, and she still loved this to this day, which is like months have passed. And on top of this, Melanie at a dark corner of the library also have really high praises for it. She also says it's a good book to start in if I'm interested in the weird genre literature. I really don't know what weird entails, and it seems like this is more on the more subtle side. I don't know. Maybe I'm just making it up. I don't recall anything except for maybe it has to do with Greek mythology. I might be completely wrong, but if you know anything about me, it's that Ellen and I have very similar literature-esque tastes, and she hasn't really steered me wrong yet. Anything that I have read with her as part of the book club have been, you know what? I gotta be honest, sometimes they're rough and sad reads, but I feel like I was able to take away something from all those reads. So it's never a failure of a read whenever I read with her. So Piranesi's, high praises all around. I'm excited to finally get to it in 2025. I wanted to read it in 2024, but I am beating myself up because I didn't put out any time for it. So as a result, I never got around to it. This year, it's already in the library queue, so whenever it comes and arrives, I'm going to be reading it. The next read is also quite similar. It is I Who Have Never Known Men, and I know absolutely nothing about this book, and Ellen specifically said to know nothing about it going in, and she absolutely loved it. So as of right now, I haven't read any reviews. I did not read any of the synopsis. I don't know anything about it. All I know is that Ellen loved it, so I'm gonna have to try it out for myself and see what I think about it. All right, for the next book, Ellen hasn't actually read it yet. She showed it on her channel, and I felt like this book is my calling. I felt like this book is something right up my alley and something I want to read, and it is The Mountain Sings. I believe this is supposed to be similar to Pachinko, but instead of following a Korean family, we're following a Vietnamese family before, during, and after the Vietnam War. And as someone who is Vietnamese, I'm just interested in getting more perspective about what happened in 1975. I feel like I don't know much about my Vietnamese heritage, and I'm hoping this could shine some light into my own heritage and my own history and background and be more understanding about what my parents and my family and my ancestors went through. So this is definitely high on my reading list. I'm really hoping to be able to buddy read this with Ellen at the Ellen Made Book Club. I also think Chris has a copy as well. So maybe I'll loop her in with me as well, because I would love to hear some perspective from another fellow Vietnamese person as well. Those three are my picks from the LMA Book Club in 2025. And on a similar note, the next couple of reads are all going to be about my heritage, embracing my heritage, and learning more about my heritage, with the very first one being The Sympathizer. I would say I don't really know much about what this book is going to entail. I do know that it did win a Pulitzer Prize in fiction, so I'm hoping it'll give me some perspective on the politics at play from both the American perspective and the Vietnamese perspective. But again, because my knowledge in Vietnam and Vietnamese history is so lacking, I'm hoping that maybe this will give some more perspective for me, give me a little bit more knowledge, give me a little bit more information about what went on in history in a different tone, a different tonal shift than The Mountain Sings, because one, we have one that's following a family that's impacted by the war, whereas the other one, you're more on the political side, playing as a spy and being the action taker versus the person who's receiving the consequences of the action. So again, very interested in this book to just gain more knowledge about my heritage in general. Now, my next book is going to be Con Ăn Cơm Chưa, Have You Eaten Yet? And this is a Vietnamese book with English translation, and it is a children's book, but we all have to start somewhere, right? I said that one of my goals in 2025 is going to be reading a Vietnamese book. I thought that I wanted to read more of a translated work. So, for example, Harry Potter in English and then Harry Potter in Vietnamese, so that I have two books to compare it to. But I'm not super confident in my reading skills right now. So I am starting off with a children's book with translated text. And then I think I'm going to just go up from there. I do have a couple of books in mind. Once I kind of secure where my reading levels is at, I can read things, I can pronounce them, and then when I pronounce them in Vietnamese, I know the word is, but I think I can't directly read it off the page. I don't know 100% sure how to describe what I mean, but I'm just going to start off my reading with a more of a children's book level and then slowly graduate from there and move on to more of a YA level, middle grade level, YA level, and then maybe some adult work in, I don't know, 2028. At least that's my goal. Now, the next two reads I got were from Renee at Beyond Books. The very first one is probably one of her favorite books to mention on her channel. So I mean, it needs to be on my list, right? And it's going to be The Woman by Kristen Hanna. This one is a chonker. It is thick, and it basically follows the female nurses during the Vietnam War. I have zero clues as to what to expect from this book. Again, I know of the Vietnam War. I know how it kind of impacted Vietnam on a very, very surface level. And I think this would be a good perspective on the American front end of things about the people and the soldiers who have sacrificed themselves, along with the female nurses that also helped out during the war. I'm just honestly excited to learn more about history. So Renee recommended this book with very high praises. Of course, I have to read it. The next book is on the serious side, and it is A Conversation with a Pedophile in the Interest of Our Children. I noted this book down after Renee's review video of it. It seems like in this book, we'll get the perspective of both the perpetrator and the victim. I think, like Renee, if you have the stomach to read this book, I think it's a good book to understand the psychopathy of things, to understand how the perpetrator is able to manipulate the circumstances in which he has this whole control over the victim, and how kids could fall victims to this, and how we could better prevent it as a society. I just really enjoy reading things about the psychopathy of things, just understanding things a little bit more. I think for a perpetrator to be so outright in why he did what he did, I think it should be studied. I think it should be noted and try to be understood, not to say that they're good, but to prevent these actions from happening to other kids. So I think it's a really important book, and I'm going to be picking it up. It's definitely a very, very dark book. So I would need to know where on the timeline to read it. It'll probably be read when I'm just reading a lot more fantasy and a lot more fun things for sure. But again, it is a book I'm interested in just for the betterment of children in general. So the next set of books are all recommendations from a new favorite booktuber of mine, and it is Cat at the Cat Bite. I don't know why, but her recommendation videos go so hard every time one of them comes up, I literally have her video on one side and my TBR list on another side, because immediately after she finishes talking about a book, I have to add it on my TBR, because her recommendation and the way she is able to articulate what the book is about is so well done that even without reading the book, I feel like it's already challenging my world views. It's giving a little bit more perspective on the world itself. So definitely make sure to go check out her videos, specifically the feminist book recommendation and the books that change her world views, because this is where the recommendations come from. I don't think I could do it justice by giving synopsis of the books, especially given that I have not read them yet. But in a rapid fire session, I'm going to list out all the books that I am planning to read that were from her videos. The very first one up is Difficult Woman, A History of Feminism in 11 Fights. The second book is Invisible Woman, Data Biases in a World Designed for Men. The third book is The Right to Sex, Feminism in the 21st Century. The fourth book is The Value of Everything, Making and Taking in a Global Economy. And the very last one is Poverty by America. So those 5 books, I can't believe she's literally taking up a fifth of my TBR for 2025, but I cannot get these books out of my head. And I love data, I love statistics, I love all that good things. So I'm hoping these books will be a hit for me as well. So once again, thank you, Kat, for all these amazing recommendations. And I can't wait for more of your recommendation videos. The next book I added on my 25 before the end of 2025 is on a similar vibe as the books that Kat recommended, meaning their statistical nonfiction book. And the book is called The Anxious Generation: How the Great Rewiring of Childhood Caused an Epidemic of Mental Illness. I've actually heard a lot of mixed reviews about this book. I'm not 100% sure if this is a very solid pick for 2025. The synopsis really intrigued me, but I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to enjoy this or not. I gotta be real honest. I'm interested in seeing what the data says, but I also heard that the data was not used very accurately and it was more cherry-picked. So I'm interested in just reading it and seeing if I like it or not, or seeing if it gives me any other perspective. If it doesn't, easy DNF. The whole point of this is just to try it out and see if I like it or not. All right, now that puts us at 14 out of 25 books for 2025. Now the next set of books are books that were recommended throughout BookTube. The very first one being Done and Dusted, A Cowboy Romance. I believe this was recommended by so many booktubers, but the ones that I have on top of my head is Ashley Bex Reed, Jessie, and Shuba. I have no idea what to expect from it. I don't think I would like a cowboy romance. It's a little bit weird. It's a very niche topic. I just don't understand why is it specifically cowboy romance? Like why is that a subgenre? And I think I'm a little bit intimidated by it. It was on my TBR for the longest time, and I think I'm gonna just do it. I think I'm just gonna try it. I'm gonna read it, and I want to join in the hype and see what it's about. The next book on my list is The Naturals. I have seen this book across BookTube on many people's channel, but the 2 channels that stood out to me that I remember their reactions and their ratings the most is going to be Jessie and then Rebecca. Now, I read a spicy Criminal Mind vibes book last year, aka the Mindfuck series. So this year, I have to read the YA criminal profiling with a sprinkle of magic into it. It seems, again, perfectly up my alley. I love criminal minds. I love profiling. I love understanding the psychopathy of things. I love it when books or TV shows have that in them. It's one of my favorite kind of genres or subgenres. I don't really know what to categorize it as, but I really enjoy that in all forms of media. So I think I'm going to enjoy The Natural for sure. And if I recall correctly, I think Chelsea was also looking to read this book. So maybe we can buddy read it, Chelsea, whenever you're available or whenever you want to read it. I'm just excited to read this book, and maybe I'm just more excited to find someone to talk about the books with. But yeah, now the next book is another book from Jessie, and this is actually one of her favorite books, and it is The Book Thief. This takes place in World War II Nazi Germany, and it follows a fictional female protagonist and her family where they are currently hiding a Jew during Nazi Germany. And also along with that, she's also been stealing books and keeping them from being burnt by Nazi Germany. Now, this book seems like it has a lot of historical references, and I want to be able to see how he's able to emulate a cruel and dark piece of history into a work of fiction. And also because I read A Diary of a Young Girl last year, I thought that it would pair very well with The Book Thief as well, since it has similar undertone, except one is nonfiction and this one is a work of fiction. So I'm really excited to get to this in 2025. I cannot wait to see what it has in store for me and what are all the messages the author left for us in this book. And the final book that has been recommended to me all across booktube is going to be The House on the Cerulean Sea. Did you know that today the word of the day is cerulean? Anyways, I added this book so long ago. I think I added it around the time that the second book came out. I do believe this might be a duology. I'm not 100% certain, but I do know the second book came out, or the companion book to this book came out sometime last year, and that's where I first heard about The House on the Cerulean Sea. I heard it's a very fun, good book, very emotional, I believe. It's been a while since I've heard someone talk about this, but everyone whom I have heard talk about it really enjoyed it. I do remember the hype for this book is pretty high, and that's why it's on my 25 before 2025. Let's hop into the time machine and travel back to the 2010s, because these books really signify the 2010s for me. These are books that I read in high school or got them in high school, so I'm going to categorize them as nostalgia, 2010s nostalgia. Let's call it that. The very first one up is going to be The Liar, the King, and the Libertine. I talked about this book way too many times on this channel, but ex-high school teacher wrote this book. I purchased it to support her. I read what she signed for me, and Miss DeVay. I finally understood what you wrote, and you're a little sassy, aren't you? You're just a little sassy, and that's a little bit of a snipe remark about me. You know what? She's right, though. She's absolutely right. Thinking back, she is absolutely right, and I should have understood what she meant in her note, but it is what it is. It's all right. I will be reading your book in 2025, Miss DeVay, and I will finally be able to see what I thought about it. As a full-fledged, flushed-out reader who's read plenty of different works. So I will be critically analyzing your piece of work. I can't wait to publish my first review on it. I think it might be the first review on Goodreads for it, so I might be a trendsetter. My sass and remarks aside, the next book on this list is going to be The Tipping Point. I added this on because I wanted to get a little bit of a refresher on this book before I read its sequel, The Revenge of the Tipping Point. I do remember The Revenge of the Tipping Point coming out late last year, and then that also reminded me how much I enjoyed The Tipping Point to begin with. I love the little statistical data that really shows us where the cutoff point is to tip the scale over to one side or the other. Like, something that really stood out to me is the birthdays in correlations to superstar sports player, aka people who are born closest to the cutoff line generally makes it bigger because they have like a size advantage over people. That's the one note that really stood out to me, and he has multiple sets of examples and data to showcase this throughout his books. So I want to refresh my memory a little bit, pick up this book and see what I think about it now, 15 years later. Oh my god, I'm old. And see what I think about it, if I still have the same opinions about it, if I still really enjoy it or not. And on a similar note, we have The Overachievers, The Secret Lives of Driven Kids. And I'll let 2012 Mimi leave a little comment here, because apparently I loved it. Do I remember anything about it? Absolutely not. So I'm wondering why I really enjoyed it. I think I had a sense of relatability to this book as a high schooler, so I think that's why I enjoyed it so much at the time. So again, as a perspective of an adult, I want to see and reflect back on how accurate it is and how much of it is just my teenage self deluding myself into thinking that it's one-to-one and it's accurate. So another reread for me in 2025. And the last book to wrap up my 2010 era is going to be Animal Farm. Last year, I read 1984 and I gave you guys my perspective and my opinions about it in my videos. This year, I'm going to reread Animal Farm and see how my perspective has changed and see if I understand the book any better, because apparently I did not understand the book at all. or maybe I understood it a little bit too well, because tell me why. I remember this very clearly in my English class because we read Animal Farms for English. We had to do a presentation poster. Tell me why I drew a horse as a pig. Like, I mean, technically, if you think about it, if you really, really deep dive and think about it, just give me a second. I don't recall correctly, so I might be talking out of my butt, but hear me out. Hear me out. Wasn't the whole point for all the animals to be equal, and then somewhere along the lines, the pigs are the superior ones, but because they want all the animals to be equals as the pigs? So I might be completely wrong. Maybe this is why I'm saying I need to reread it. All right. So oh god, my English teacher, if she sees this video, it's going to be really embarrassing. So no one send it to her, please. Please, please. Okay, cool. The next set of books don't really fall into any specific categories. That's why it's under miscellaneous. And the very first one up, luckily, is already on my January TBR, and it is The Murder on the Orient Express. I mean, I talked about this already in January, but I'm looking for a good mystery. So for once, I listened to my husband and he says, well, why don't you just go back to the classic? Why don't you just go back to the well-known, well-loved mystery murder? And you know what? I'm listening to you, husband. I'm listening to you, hubby. And I am reading Murder on the Orient Express in 2025. And it's already going to be read for January. So I hope you're happy, but I bet he's not happy. He's never happy at anything that I do because he's gonna be like, why didn't you read this sooner? Or something like that. Anyways, I'm excited to read my first ever Agatha Christie's book. I have no idea what to expect. I talked about it with him, and he says that he's owned this book for so long, like the pages are yellowing, as you guys can see. But he hasn't officially read it because he was spoiled on how it goes. And I'm over here like, how long has this been? And he's like, decades. Girl, I would not remember. Like, you just saw me try to talk about what Animal Farm was. Like, I don't remember anything. My brain cannot hold information. And for the 24th book in the books that I want to read by the end of 2025 is going to be The Vegetarian. I want to read this before June, ideally, since this is actually a recommendation from my mother-in-law, and I think we're gonna visit her in June for her birthday. And I just really want to have something to talk to her about, aside from, you know, the weather, how I've been, all that good stuff. I want to talk to her about a book that she was really excited when she purchased it because it's a piece of literature, a piece of Korean literature that won the Nobel Prize in literature. So she was really excited about that. She's ecstatic. She purchased a copy in English and then the original Korean version of it. So I'm excited to read the English version, give her my thoughts, my opinions, all that good stuff. I am scared though, because I've heard very mixed reviews on this book, but I also want to know why it won a Nobel Peace in literature. I'm very curious about that as well. So I'm excited to read it. I'm scared that I might be bored and then I have to tell her that I didn't vibe with it. But, you know, more things to discuss about, right? Maybe she'll tell me she didn't really enjoy it either. And for the final book to end my 25 books for 2025 is going to be A Fate Inked in Blood. This is one of the original books that have been on my TBR before I even started BookTube. And I feel like it's time. It's time for me to give it a try or just DNF it and cross it off the list. I actually also tried to buddy read it with Cat, a Curious Cat, some time ago, and I just couldn't start it because I had so many library loans currently due, so I had to prioritize those over the buddy read. And I'm so disappointed that it just slipped through the cracks. I do believe this is a romance fantasy with Vikings and mythology. I do think that Kat really enjoyed the book. So I'm excited to see what it's about. I'm excited to see what kind of fantasy elements is going to be different in this book and all of the things surrounding it. And yeah, that's all I have to say about A Fate Inked in Blood. And I think I'm just gonna wrap up this video here. All right, now those are the 25 books I want to finish before the end of the year. That comes out to being approximately 20% of my reading if my reading data tracks the same as 2024. Let me know in the comment section. Any of these books are interesting to you and what books you are trying to read in 2025. With that, I'm gonna close off this video here. Thanks for sticking by with me. Thanks for listening to me yap about these 25 books, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!